Hansel and Gretel. The beginning. Once upon a time, on the edge of a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. They had very little to eat, and during a great famine that spread across the land, they could no longer even find their daily bread. One evening, as the woodcutter lay in bed worrying, he sighed and said to his wife, "What will become of us? How can we feed our children when we have nothing for ourselves?" "Listen to me," answered his wife. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the thickest part of the forest. We will make a fire for them and give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go about our work and leave them alone. They will not find their way back home, and we will be rid of them." "No," said the man, "I cannot do that. How could I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? Wild animals would soon tear them to pieces." But his wife would not listen to his objections. She scolded and reproached him until he finally agreed. "But I still feel sorry for the poor children," he said. The 2 children, too hungry to sleep, had heard everything their stepmother said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now it's all over for us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel, "don't worry. I'll find a way to help us." When the adults had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little jacket, opened the lower door, and crept outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles in front of the house were glistening like silver coins. Hansel bent down and filled his jacket pockets with as many as he could fit. The middle journey. The next morning, before sunrise, the stepmother woke the children. "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each of them a piece of bread and said, "Here's something for lunch, but don't eat it before then, because you won't get anything else." Gretel carried the bread under her apron because Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. Then they all set out together toward the forest. After they had walked for a while, Hansel stopped and looked back at the house. He did this again and again. His father said, "Hansel, why are you always stopping and looking back? Pay attention and don't forget to use your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my white cat that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." "You fool," said the stepmother, "that's not your cat. That's the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel had not been looking at his cat. Instead, he had been dropping the shiny pebbles from his pocket onto the path. When they reached the middle of the forest, their father said, "Now, children, gather some wood. I'll make a fire so you won't be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood until they had a little mountain of it. The brushwood was lit, and when the flames were burning well, the stepmother said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest. We're going into the forest to cut wood. When we're finished, we'll come back and get you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. At noon, each ate their piece of bread. They could hear the blows of an axe, so they thought their father was nearby. However, it was not an axe but a branch that he had tied to a dead tree, and the wind was blowing it back and forth. After sitting there a long time, their eyes grew weary and closed, and they fell fast asleep. When they finally woke up, it was already dark. Gretel began to cry and said, "How will we get out of the forest?" Hansel comforted her, "Wait a while until the moon comes up, and then we'll find the way." When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like newly minted silver coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long and arrived at their father's house just as day was breaking. Their stepmother was angry when she saw them, but their father was overjoyed, for he had been heartbroken at leaving them behind. Not long afterward, there was once again great need everywhere, and one evening the children heard their stepmother saying to their father, "We have eaten everything up again. We have only half a loaf of bread left, and then the song will be over. We must get rid of the children. We'll take them deeper into the forest so they won't find their way out again." This time, Hansel could not collect pebbles because the door was locked. But he comforted Gretel and said, "Don't cry. Sleep well. God will help us." The next morning they received their pieces of bread, but they were even smaller than before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his bread in his pocket and often stopped to throw crumbs onto the ground. "Hansel, "Why are you always stopping and looking around?" asked his father. "I'm looking at my little dove that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "You fool," said the stepmother, "that's not your dove. That's the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel gradually threw all the crumbs onto the path. This time, the stepmother led them even deeper into the forest than before. Once again, they made a large fire, and the stepmother said, "Just sit here, children. If you get tired, you can sleep a little. We're going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening, when we're finished, we'll come and get you." At noon, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had scattered his piece along the path. Then they fell asleep, and evening came and went, but no one came for the poor children. They woke up in the dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister, saying, "Wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we'll see the bread crumbs that I scattered. They will show us the way home." When the moon came up, they got up, but they could not find any crumbs, for the thousands of birds that fly about in the forest and in the fields had eaten them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We'll find our way," but they did not find it. They walked all night and all the next day from morning until evening, but they could not find their way out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, having eaten nothing but a few berries that they found growing on the ground. They were so tired that their legs would no longer carry them, so they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 days since they had left their father's house. They started walking again, but they only got deeper and deeper into the forest. If help did not come soon, they would perish. At noon, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a branch. It sang so beautifully that they stopped to listen. When it finished, it spread its wings and flew in front of them. They followed it until they came to a little house. The bird sat on the roof, and when they came closer, they saw that the little house was built entirely of bread and roofed with cakes. The windows were made of clear sugar. "Let's go to it," said Hansel, "and have a blessed meal. I'll eat some of the roof, and Gretel, you can eat some of the window. That will be sweet." Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof to see how it tasted, while Gretel stood next to the window panes and nibbled at them. Then a gentle voice called out from inside. "Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, "The wind, the wind. The heaven-born wind." And they continued eating without being disturbed. Hansel, who found the roof quite tasty, tore off a large piece, and Gretel pushed out an entire round window pane, sat down, and ate it with great pleasure. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman, old as the hills and leaning on a crutch, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they dropped what they were eating. But the old woman shook her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who brought you here? Just come in and stay with me. No harm will come to you." She took them by the hand and led them into her little house. Then she served them a good meal, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterward she made up 2 beautiful little beds with white sheets, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be friendly. She was really a wicked witch who lay in wait for children, and she had built the little house of bread only to lure them to her. Whenever a child fell into her power, she would kill, cook, and eat him, and for her that was a feast day. Early the next morning, before the children were awake, she got up and looked at them sleeping so peacefully with their full red cheeks. "That will be a good bite," she muttered to herself. Then she grabbed Hansel with her scrawny hand and carried him to a little stall, where she locked him behind a barred door. He could scream all he wanted, it did her no good. Then she went to Gretel, shook her awake, and cried, "Get up, lazy bones. Fetch water and cook something good for your brother. He's locked outside in the stall and is to be fattened up. When he's fat, I'll eat him." Gretel began to cry bitterly, but it was all for nothing. She had to do what the wicked witch demanded. Now Hansel was given the best food every day, while Gretel received nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman crept to the little stall and called, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can feel if you're fat yet." But Hansel stuck out a little bone, and the old woman, who had dim eyes and could not see well, thought it was Hansel's finger. She wondered why he didn't get fat. After 4 weeks had passed and Hansel was still thin, impatience overcame her, and she would wait no longer. "Come here, Gretel," she called to the girl. "Hurry up and fetch water. Fat or thin, tomorrow I will slaughter and cook Hansel." Oh, how the poor little sister wailed as she was forced to carry the water, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks. "Dear God, please help us," she cried. "If only the wild animals had devoured us in the forest, then we would have died together." "Stop your blubbering," said the old woman. "It won't help you." Early the next morning, Gretel had to get up, make a fire, and hang up the kettle. "First we'll bake," said the old woman. "I've already made a fire in the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel toward the oven, from which fiery flames were leaping. "Crawl in," said the witch, "and see if it's hot enough to put the bread in." She intended to close the oven door after Gretel climbed in, and she would bake and eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in mind and said, "I don't know how to do it. How can I get in?" "Stupid goose," said the old woman, "the opening is big enough. See, I could get in myself." She crawled up and stuck her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a shove that sent her all the way in, quickly shut the iron door, and secured it with a bar. The old woman began to howl frightfully, but Gretel ran away, and the godless witch burned miserably to death. Gretel ran straight to Hansel, opened his little stall, and called, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang out like a bird from its cage when someone opens its door. How happy they were! They fell into each other's arms, jumped around, and kissed each other. The ending. Since they no longer had anything to fear, they went into the witch's house. In every corner there were chests full of pearls and precious stones. "These are even better than pebbles," said Hansel, and he shoved as many as he could into his pockets. Gretel said, "I want to take something home with me too," and she filled her apron. "But now we must go," said Hansel, "so we can get out of this enchanted forest." After they had walked for several hours, they came to a large body of water. "We cannot get across," said Hansel. "I don't see a footbridge or a bridge." "There are no boats either," answered Gretel, "but there's a white duck swimming. If I ask her, she will help us across." Then she called out, little duck, here stand Hansel and Gretel. Neither a footbridge nor a bridge. Take us on your white back." The duck came over to them, and Hansel climbed onto her back and asked his sister to sit down next to him. "No," answered Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck. She should take us across one at a time." That's what the good little animal did, and when they were safely on the other side and had walked on a little while, the forest began to look more and more familiar to them. Finally, they saw their father's house in the distance. They began to run, rushed into the house, and threw their arms around their father's neck. The man had not had a single happy hour since he had left his children in the forest. His wife, however, had died. Gretel shook out her apron, and the pearls and precious stones bounced around the room, and Hansel added to them by throwing one handful after the other from his pockets. Now all their cares were at an end, and they lived together in pure happiness. My tale is done, and away it has run. And if it hasn't died, then it's still alive today.